Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys. For these episodes, we're talking about neurodiversity, and I'm so happy to introduce Laura Wallis to the conversation. Welcome, Laura.
Hi.
Hi, lovely to have you. So, I'm not going to say anything really about who you are. I'll let you do an introduction. So, please, if you want to introduce yourself to people, let them know who you are, what you do.
Sure, great. Thanks, Matt. So I'm Laura Wallis. I'm currently freelancing and self-employed. I do a number of different projects. One of those is an organisation called Debating Mental Health, which coaches young people who have mental health support needs to speak out in public on the mental health topics that matter to them. I also do a bit of writing and workshop facilitation on other topics, including neurodiversity, actually. So a range of different projects going on.
Excellent. So really good stuff. So you're doing some amazing work already around the topics. And we're talking about neurodiversity for these episodes, which is, well, you have a story. So I'm going to ask you, Laura, to tell us a little bit about your story about neurodiversity, please.
Sure, yeah, great, thank you. So I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2018, which actually just happened to also be the year I got married. So it was quite a
Wow.
life-changing year in many respects.
Right.
Um, and that was after a 2-year wait, which lots of your listeners will be familiar with the story. Um, and I sought that diagnosis because at the time I had been working with children and young people in mental health services in a non-clinical role. And I was working on a specific project with girls and young women who had been diagnosed with ADHD later than their male peers.
Right.
And we were asking them about their experiences at school, their experiences socially, the kinds of things that were their real strengths, the kinds of things that had been challenges for them. And absolutely everything they said really resonated.
Oh, wow.
And I had an intern with me at the time. And she said, "Oh, it was really interesting when we were in that meeting. I looked around and everybody except me was fiddling." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I was too." And just absolutely everything that the girls said or did resonated. And I thought, I just wonder. And so I looked into it and then decided to seek a diagnosis.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so that's a fascinating sort of journey for you to get to that. So in 2018, you're an adult, right? This is
Yeah.
You're in an adult world working as an adult, and now you're starting to realize that there's things going on. So talk us through. So the diagnosis obviously gives you clarity, what's going on.
Mhm.
How was life before you had that diagnosis? What sort of things were happening for you?
It was things like I knew my attention would sometimes drift.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I have combined type ADHD. So there are three types. You can have
Okay.
inattentive, you can have combined, or you can have hyperactive. I have combined, which is a little bit of hyperactivity and a little bit of distractedness. I did know that the distractedness was there, but it had been the case that I'd mentioned it to sort of friends and family who it also turns out now are also neurodivergent.
Yep.
And I'd kind of been like, oh, well, these things happen to me. I get distracted easily if a talk's long or I'm sat in a lecture at university or I'm trying to do a spreadsheet with some numbers on it. And lots of people around me just said, oh, well, that's just normal. Turns out because they also have ADHD.
Oh,
So I didn't realize that those things weren't normal, and I didn't realize that it wasn't usual to be really overwhelmed by tidying up my bedroom or doing the dishes or staying on top of the laundry. And I'm not talking just like, oh, the laundry's really built up. I'm talking like, I don't think I can do this without help, which sounds really silly if you don't experience it. But
yeah.
if you do experience it, you just can't overcome your body. Your body just prevents you doing it.
Right. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I think just touching on it, just to something you said in there about the neurotypical, everybody just thought it was normal, but actually when we're all going through and doing it the same way, I guess that is normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for all those family members. And so were you the first person in your family to be diagnosed with neurodiversity or
I
neurodivergent?
was, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then since then, one sister has had a number of different diagnoses.
Okay.
Um, and then two other sisters are questioning things that might be going on for them, as well as my mum.
Right.
So yeah,
Wow.
sort of kick-started a chain.
Started this chain of events, but actually
Absolutely, yeah.
not a bad thing. It's
Yeah.
important, isn't it? Because then it helps us to learn. Like you say, it's helping us to learn to work through the things that we're struggling with or the challenges. So hyperactivity. So you have combined. So with hyperactivity. So can you give us any examples of things that might have happened previously with regards to things like hyperactivity?
Yeah, so it's not the stereotypical kind of 5-year-old boys drunk too much squash and bouncing off the walls thing for me. It's
Yeah.
I will fidget all the time.
Yeah.
So I've actually broken several watches because I unfasten and fasten them all the time.
Oh wow. Yep.
But a lot for me and actually a lot of other women is conversational hyperactivity. So
Okay.
I'll suddenly have a thought that feels really, really relevant in a conversation. And my husband used to get really irritated because I would interrupt all the time. Not because I didn't care about what he was saying, but actually because I felt like I had something that demonstrated I related and understood to him. So he'd come up with an experience and I'd say, oh, that's like the time that XYZ happened to me. And he'd be like, well, why are you interrupting me? It's not about you. But for me, it was actually showing empathy.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it was the interruption that is the hyperactivity. It's kind of an impulsive act now.
Yeah. You still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But people know why. So you can
Yeah, so
verbalize
I'm a
that.
lot more exactly. Yeah, I tell most people straight up, oh, I've got ADHD, so you might notice I do these sorts of things.
I think that's so brilliant. I really do. I think that's just such an open way to make sure people are aware of what's happening versus, I'm not being rude and I'm not being, I'm this is just part of what's me and it makes you up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I think that's fascinating. I think the
thank
conversational
you.
hyperactivity, I see that in a lot of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, incredible. So thank you for opening my eyes to that as well. So like I told you before we joined this, this is my learning journey as much as it is for the listeners. So I'm taking this all in. I'm taking it all in. So it's brilliant.
Excellent.
And so so obviously growing up, so was there any real struggles growing up then, with regards now looking back, because obviously with reflection it makes it a lot easier to see, doesn't it? But would you say struggles were created by maybe the neurodiversity or not a lack of knowledge of it?
Yeah, so it never seemed like I was struggling
Mm.
because, and this is often the case with a lot of girls and women,
Yep.
socially we kind of learn to hide those things because actually social interaction matters to girls in a really big way.
Yep.
But I would always have things on my school reports like make sloppy mistakes in maths, um, doesn't need to keep interrupting the class, is chatty in class. And it would always particularly pertain to maths and science, which weren't my stronger subjects.
Okay. Yep.
There was no problem at all in English and languages and geography. And so those reports were always really shining. And so overall, I was a good enough student. I was quite liked. So
Yeah.
nobody ever noticed anything. They just thought I was a bit chatty or and I thought I was poor at maths. But it turns out that actually those were a focus issue and that I actually struggle with maths. And so then I struggle to focus on maths because I find it
Okay.
challenging.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So and would your parents have seen that? How would they have dealt with that? So on your report, seeing those sort of comments, would they have been
Um,
supportive with it?
yeah, so I remember having a maths tutor as one way
Okay.
of trying to deal with it.
Right. Okay.
Um, but again, so I didn't fail by any stretch. I got a
Mm.
B at GCSE, so I did perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I did very well, in fact, and so that's why it wasn't picked up on. And my mum just encouraged me to work harder with it, which for me actually did work and was fine, but
Yeah.
probably I wouldn't have been able to sustain it beyond GCSE. So I think it was because it was a
Yeah.
really intense period that I could sustain it, but beyond that, it might have been disruptive.
Yeah, interesting. Because yeah, the comparative there for us is our daughter's going through GCSEs now, and we're seeing some of that, and she has the diagnosis with ADHD already in place. So it makes so much sense. It does really, and I can see so many parallels to it. So thank you for sharing that. I really, really appreciate that. So 2018, this pivotal moment in 2018, you're learning more about ADHD. You go forward for the diagnosis. You go through the assessment after a 2 year. So 2 year wait. So was
Mm.
the wait so 2 years up to 2018 or 2 years past 2018. So 2018 was
Up to,
diagnosis. Okay.
yes, so I'd got
Hmm.
the referral in 2016. Yeah.
Okay, fine. And so after, what happened? So obviously you had conversations with family members who then start questioning their own sort of potential neurodivergency. So what happened for you?
A couple of things. So personally, it has given my husband and I a framework through which to understand our communication difficulties.
Okay.
So like many couples, there are times where things are fine and there are times where things are a bit harder. And we knew that there was some underlying reason why we were coming at things from a different perspective, communication wise, but
Yeah.
we just could never get it. And then as soon as we got the diagnosis, we were able to do some research. And then that means that it gives us a framework to understand why my communication is quite so different to his. And so it's just helped us to understand one another better. But it's also helped me to be a bit more thoughtful. Like sometimes if I know I'm about to interrupt someone in a conversation, I will either, if I have the ability, write it down because if I've got a phone or something,
Mm.
or I will say, actually, I've just had a thought. Would you mind if I say it so that I don't forget it? And then we can come back to this. And it's just more about how I frame what I'm doing rather than stopping what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then professionally, I'm very upfront. Like I've already said, before every training I deliver, I say that I've got ADHD.
Yep.
You may notice I've got a fidget cube with me. That's to keep me on track. It's not because I'm distracted. It's actually the opposite. And very interestingly, I find that that creates a safe place for the participants in the workshops. So I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, "Oh, thank you so much for saying that you've got ADHD. It means that I'm sat here feeling like I'm not so weird for being autistic, or I feel
Oh,
like I'm
wow.
allowed to bring my dyspraxia into the room." And
Yeah.
thank you for doing that. So it's sort of changed my practice a little bit too.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's amazing, honestly, because I think having that openness very early in any of those environments helps others, and exactly what you've described helps. And it's almost like people are seeking permission to say it, and
Yeah,
sometimes it just takes one person to tell people their journey or their story, which is why these conversations to me are so valuable, because you're opening a conversation in the door for somebody else, and it might not be me necessarily, but it's somebody listening who sits there going, but I've struggled with these things and I've been through these life journeys and experiences, and actually maybe this is something that I also have around me or as part of me. And I think that's so. Do you find it quite liberating to tell people?
definitely. Yeah, I think because before I would always worry there was something wrong with me.
Right. Yeah.
Um, why can't I just get on with the laundry? Why can't I just stop interrupting? Why can't I just remember what my husband told me 20 minutes ago? And now it turns out that there's a reason, and being able to talk to people about that reason means that they can understand that a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, and brilliant. And yeah, that's what we got to do more of. In terms, so there's sort of different routes to maintaining ourselves. So when we're struggling, and I've talked to different people about ADHD in different ways, different guises, different experiences. Of course, everybody's unique. So there's obviously medication, there's holistic therapies and holistic things. What's your sort of routine to make sure you keep yourself in check?
Yeah. So I have taken medication.
Okay,
I'm not currently, but I have, and I do find it helpful when I do take it.
right.
Um, I I've also got chronic illnesses, so the exercise thing is one that I like to do. I like to get out and get fresh air, but
Okay,
sometimes that's not possible if my illness is flared up.
sure.
So when that's calm and fine, then fresh air really helps. And then some slightly weird ones. So I find if I'm really overwhelmed, a teaspoon of almond butter really helps for some reason. It
Okay.
just kind of brings my focus back. And also cold water on your wrists.
Oh,
There's something physiological about kind of resetting your physiology that I don't know the science behind.
okay.
And then a lot of fidget toys. I've got fidget cubes and kind of
You've got
tangles, which
have you got
lots of
one in front of
children
you at the
like.
moment? You've got one in front of
No,
you at the
but
moment.
I'm
You
playing
haven't.
with my blanket.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, fidgeting a lot. I've got fidget toys in every corner of the house.
Right.
And also there's something I take to every workshop I deliver. So I
Yeah.
just plop them on the table so that if people want them, not necessarily because they're neurodivergent, but actually some people who may
Yeah.
have anxiety like them or yeah, various different things.
Yeah. I have a deconstructed pen at the moment, so that's for me a good fidget toy. Almond butter.
Mm.
I want to touch on that. It's bizarre. I've never heard this. So what is it? What does it do?
I
Did
it
somebody tell you
just
about it?
no. So
Oh,
I think I discovered because I like almond butter and I'd had it with
okay,
some
fair enough.
bananas for breakfast one morning. I don't even remember how I discovered it, but yeah, I do know that if I have almond butter more than like solid almonds, but probably because they're already broken down, so my body doesn't have to do that.
Right.
It just helps me to focus. So I think there must be something to do with omega-3 or
Okay.
something that's a bit brain boosting.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't make me focus all day long, but if I've got
Yeah. Yeah.
something that I need to focus on or I'm feeling a bit
Yeah.
edgy, kind of yeah, levels me out. And I don't know the science, I don't know why,
No.
and I don't know how I came across it, but it works for me.
You know what? If it works for you, then put it on the list of things that you do, right? As part of your
Exactly.
holistic care. So I love that.
Yeah.
I really do. I find that fascinating. I'm going to have to ask everybody the same question now. Is any sort of quirky little things that you do to help you maintain yourself? But oh, brilliant. I don't actually know where to go with another question off of that because it's sort of like it's almost like we found the holy grail, almond butter, and there's going to be now a marketing around what people need when they're diagnosed with ADHD. So in your work, so obviously you're very open, you're supporting, but you're doing a lot of work with young people and supporting young people, and I think that's fantastic. So sort of what's the sort of the general flow of conversations or the things that you're doing with young people at the moment?
Yeah, so with debating mental health, it's actually a really interesting time from a neurodivergent perspective, and
Mm.
I'll come back to that. If I don't
Yep.
remember, please prompt me.
Yep.
Um, so generally what we do at Debating Mental Health is we run workshops to support young people who have or may have mental health support needs. And we run workshops that are kind of public speaking and debate based, but in a really fun rather than politicsy kind of way.
Yep.
And it's basically to help young people go from I'm really anxious about speaking out in front of even two people in a meeting room to being able to say, do you know what, this is what is a problem for me and my peers in mental health at school, in the system, wherever they happen to experience a want for change. Here's what I'd like to do about it. And then we support them to work with policy and decision makers if they want
Mhm.
um, to lead that change. But for some of them, actually, it's just I would really like to be able to advocate for myself better in a mental health appointment. I don't feel like I can speak up when things aren't what I would like them to be. So it's just giving them those tools and that confidence in themselves to be able to say, actually, hey, this is something I would like to change.
Oh,
And then with regard to neurodiversity, I've noticed probably because I've got ADHD, that a lot of the young people just happen to be neurodivergent just by some coincidence of something that I'm doing.
yeah.
So I'm going to look into ways of doing a conscious program to support young neurodivergent people specifically, because lots of the public speaking tips that are kind of quite general aren't things that work for neurodivergent young people. So the things like
Right.
eye contact and practicing your script loads aren't things that necessarily work for those young people because eye contact is really hard. If you practice your script loads, actually, you may be more likely to be thrown off course because you realize halfway through you've missed something.
Yeah.
So, kind of the way that I would work with neurodivergent young people is quite different than the standard public speaking and debate tips that you might get elsewhere. So, I really want to consciously explore that.
Wow. I again another lesson learned for me. So I hadn't considered those thoughts, and I'm building up my knowledge bank here, which is great. So yeah, I think that's incredible. So if you're working with young people around sort of public speaking and and having the ability to be confident in public with with those sort of events, how are they relating to that, or is that something that I know you're planning or you want to do more in the future? But have you had any examples of good sort of practices where you've supported people?
Yeah, so I think our biggest one was we attended the Global Ministerial Mental Health Summit, also in 2018,
Oh
really
wow.
big year.
So yeah, to get married, get died. Yeah, yeah, amazing. Okay.
So that was we had 10 young people running the children and young people's work stream at that. So that was just the most incredible experience for them.
Yeah.
Um, we also went to Downing Street and they all spoke to Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at the time. about some of the changes they wanted to see in the mental health system.
Okay.
Um, so that's kind of the big policy end of things. But then it's just things like young people who I worked with 4 years ago still coming back to me and saying, actually, would you be able to provide me a reference? Because I feel like you really saw a big change in me. And I feel
Yeah.
like you know that confidence and you know what I've been through.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of having that relationship with those young people who are now still saying, your program really changed how I see myself, and I wouldn't be going for this job if it weren't for that program. So
Brilliant.
those kind of individual everyday changes are kind of the real reason that I'm doing it. And the policy
Yeah.
stuff's great, but
Takes a
those
while.
individual changes are what's making the real difference.
That's brilliant. And do you feel like that's your fuel, and that fuels your passion more by seeing those changes
Definitely,
and knowing that
definitely.
you're making a difference with those young people?
Yeah, yeah, hugely.
I think that's brilliant. I really do. I think that's amazing. We are right towards the end of this, Laura. Believe it or not, I told you time would fly on these. But I always like to give the floor back to you just to sort of talk about any or say any final sort of thoughts that you have, what you want to share with the world, and the future that you want to see. So just throwing that over as a very big question for a very short space of time to answer it.
Great, thank you, Matt. I think for me, in the current climate around neurodivergence, there's been a lot of negative press and a
Mm,
lot of, oh, everyone's got ADHD these days sorts of headlines. And I think for me, I would say if you're questioning whether you have it, there's a reason that you're questioning whether you have it. And it's not just because you're jumping on a bandwagon, because that bandwagon isn't easy. It takes years and years to get a diagnosis. So people aren't doing it for fun or to, you know, fit in with the crowds or whatever. So if you suspect it, there's probably a reason that you're suspecting it. So I would say, yeah, trust yourself rather than the media and do
yeah.
the research that you need to support yourself.
I think that's wise words and words of wisdom. It's very easy to dismiss people who are saying that they might have these challenges, and just saying, oh, it's the latest flavor, isn't it? It's everybody wants it, everybody wants to be it. But actually, for those people that genuinely have those underlying experiences or things going on, then it can be really difficult. So thank you so much, Laura. I really do appreciate it. I've learned through this conversation again, and it's almost like it's a surprise to me. Every conversation I have, I learn, and that's beautiful. So thank you for imparting your thoughts and your experiences, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody listening will feel the same way too. So thank you. I wish you all the very best on your journey. Good luck with debating mental health, and good luck with continuing your journey to help all those young people that you're obviously supporting and looking after yourself and your family too. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Take care.
Bye.